Rasty McGibbon with Lou Gamelin, as we're going to bring you I don't know where we are, like day 8?
I think it's like day 10.
Holy moly. Day 10, but Lou's going to give us some insight. 3 women's games today, D2 National Final, D1 semis, and no better person to give us the analysis than Lou Gamelin.
Well, thank you, Rasty, for having me on. Yeah, it's going to be a fun day. The women take center stage. This is going to be a rematch. You know, arguably the top 2 teams in the land of the ACHA in Women's Division II, Assiniboine and Sioux College. I believe the last 4 champions, 3 for Assiniboine last year. Sioux College got to the mountaintop, and so they're going to meet here, and it's going to be a dynamic matchup. 2 high-scoring teams with great goaltending. It's exactly what you want out of a team, and really looking forward to it today. That's going to be the first one at noon, local time.
Interestingly, I've talked to players from both teams this morning. They think 5-on-5. They match up very well.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get to that extra man advantage and anything can happen.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And it's going to come down to who makes the least mistakes. I know it sounds cliche, it's Rasty, but that's really what it comes down to. We saw it yesterday in some of the games in the women's semis. I mean,
right.
You saw the end of the Arizona State Liberty game. We can talk about that a little bit. But this first game for the championship in D2, I think that's what it's going to come down to. These 2 schools know each other so well. They know each other's tendencies, like you mentioned, and I'm looking for a dynamite game.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think this really is the culmination and the top 2 teams in Women's Division II.
Yeah.
What other teams try to emulate in their programs, and,
right.
and you know what? We're seeing the level of play elevate in Women's Division II. And talking with Taylor Hadley, commissioner, yesterday. I think good things in the pipeline for women's D2.
Oh, I agree. It's funny you mentioned that. Since I've been covering it now for almost 10 years, the speed and the skill level is definitely improved, and it's a lot more fun to watch, and they put on a really good show.
No, I agree. Talk us through the 2 matchups we have in Women's 1.
Well, today we're going to have 2. You talk about great games. The first game is going to be Adrian College. They're going to take on Midland. These 2 teams, all these teams that are playing today know each other real well. They've played each other a lot during the regular season. Adrian won last night 8-1. It was they dominated. They started out in their first game against Arizona State a little flat. I talked to Carter Clark, their coach, a little bit, and he said, I'm kind of glad we got that first period under our belt, but after that, they've outscored their opponents 13-1, I believe, in 5 periods. And then you've got a Midland team that, I'm not going to say they struggled, but they came out a little rusty in the beginning against Indiana Tech, but Rasty, the speed of Midland was something that I was really impressed with in that game against Indiana Tech. They just wore them down, and so I think that's going to be a key in that game against Adrian, is how Adrian can match up with their speed and their skill set. And as far as Liberty against Minot State, what needs to be said about that game? Those 2 teams, whenever they get together, it's an absolute, I hate to use the word war, but it's an absolute battle. We saw what happened last night with Liberty against Arizona State in that game. Liberty, I think they were a little surprised at how much Arizona State had left in the tank. It was 1-0 after 2 periods. Arizona State was dominated throughout that whole game, but the word that we use in this tournament since day 1 on men's and women's is opportunistic. And that's what Arizona State was, getting those 2 goals in 13 seconds. Then it went to overtime. Liberty, they threw 70 shots at Eatinger, the goaltender for Arizona State. If Liberty does that, and if they're able to do that against Minot State, they'll win. I don't know if they'll be able to do that against a Minot State team that, again, they're a little physical, but they're quick. So I see that as coming right down again to the 3rd period. And again, who makes the fewest mistakes in these 2 games, because they're all so closely matched.
Yeah, I had Liberty on after the game last night, and they said that they probably were not anticipant of what they were going to face with Arizona State, which was number 10 seed in the women's. But I do think that it speaks to the level of play that we're seeing, not only in women's D1 but in women's D2 hockey, where the level of play is rising.
Yeah.
You know, the old saying was, "A rising tide lifts all boats," and I think the tide in women's hockey is definitely rising in the States and Canada.
Well, you know, if you look at the rankings in D1 all year, they've fluctuated. I mean, Michigan came in here 9. At one point, they were 4. You know, Midland and Liberty and Adrian actually for a little bit were 1, 2, and 3. I mean, in some of these schools, it is so close. It's between 1 and 10. And you're right, the level of those top 10 teams is really, really good. It's very competitive. It's sound hockey, and again, much different than it was 10 years ago. And it really is a fun brand to watch.
It really is. It really is. Lou, thanks so much for this.
You bet.
Great to have you on. We're going to get you back on tomorrow
Okay.
to give us some in-depth insight as the women's Division I. Hard to believe with such a long week that we're down to 4 games.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, we're down to 4. Lou Gamelin, Rasty McGibbon, 5-minute major, women's hockey galore.